13 tons of human hair seized, and it didn't come from volunteers. What has the Chinese Communist Party been doing to the Uyghur people? Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. The Chinese Communist Party has quite a history of brutality, and it seems the party has taken all those history lessons and applied them to the Uyghur ethnic minority in Xinjiang. It's bad. Recently, U.S. Customs captured a shipment of 13 tons of human hair products from China. And let's just say, the hair didn't come from voluntary donors. Joining me today is Nuri Turkel, a Uyghur American attorney and Uyghur rights advocate. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
So first off, congratulations on recently being named a commissioner for the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom.
Thank you. It's an honor to be in this position, particularly being appointed by Speaker Pelosi, who has been a champion for human rights in China, and me replacing a Tibetan American commissioner is another significance in addition to this unique platform that I've been provided to promote religious freedom in China.
Well, it's been great to see the U.S. government, which is often very divided, being very united on China and particularly the Uyghur situation. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what the group does?
The USERF is the acronym for the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, was established under the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. The commission has 9 commissioners and around 20 staff members. We are statutorily authorized to monitor religious freedom around the world, including to designation of countries of particular concern and making recommendations to the President of the United States, Secretary of State, and Congress to ensure that religious freedom is a key part of the U.S. foreign policy agenda.
Jose, so there's been a recent report from the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation that highlights the issue of forced abortions and sterilizations being used on Uyghur women. Can you talk about what's happening?
The forced sterilization, family planning has been part of the Uyghur life for as long as I can remember. I grew up in a society where Uyghur women to go through late-term abortion because of China's family planning policies. And recently, the Chinese leadership eased up the family planning, allowing the citizens to have 2 children. At the same time, they've been using the forced sterilization population control to prevent the population growth in the Uyghur society. Not only that the Uyghur woman must comply, but also there will be retaliation against them, or consequences, if you will, if failure to comply with the authorities' directives. So to the Uyghur people, as being a conservative human being, conservative society, conceiving a child, being able to bring a child to this world, as far as the numbers concerned, the way that they conceive and give a birth, is a matter of personal choice and a matter of privacy. It's something that husband and wife or partners decide. And yet the Chinese government not only invading Uyghur families' privacy, a right to choose, but also they're penalizing the Uyghur women who had desires to have more than what the government allowed them. And in the last 2-3 years, in addition to the forced sterilization, there have been a credible report that Uyghur women have been subject to various forms of abuses in the concentration camps, including gang rape, as reported by in a newspaper article last summer, based on the personal account of this Kazakh refugee who used to be part of the concentration camp management system. So the Uyghur people have been subject to wholesale attack on multiple fronts, religious, cultural, but now the Uyghur woman cannot even own their own body. It amounts to genocide. The Genocide Convention clearly states that if there's a systematic governmental or institutional effort to prevent population growth, that could constitute or may qualify for genocide contextually.
Well, it's been tragedy seeing what's happening to the Uyghurs. I have to ask, as a Uyghur yourself, what was your feeling when you heard U.S. Customs seized a shipment from China containing 13 tons of hair products believed to have been harvested from Uyghurs?
It is extremely disturbing, even creepy, that a Uyghur woman's hair have not been left alone. Even Uyghur woman's hair have been used by the authorities or the enterprises connected to the state for commercial purposes. This should be one of the chilling reasons that the international community, the people around the world who appreciates human values, human rights, religious freedom, to speak out. The international community cannot continue to go business as usual. When we're dealing as a repressive, brutal regime that have zero tolerance on political dissent, or we're being just other. As a commissioner, my job is not only focus on Uyghur religious freedom, I am also responsible for other persecuted religious minorities, including Christian, Chinese, Falun Gong practitioners, Tibetan Buddhists, and others. So I urge the Chinese government to revisit their policies and reverse some of the repressive policies, or even just get onto the right side of the civilization. I know it's a loaded word, but the Chinese government and Chinese people and Chinese society cannot have their own rightful place as long as they continue to repress their own population for political expediency, for this self-created image enemy in religious practitioners, including the Uyghurs, the Tibetan Buddhists, and the Falun Gong practitioners and Chinese Christians. So Ambassador Sam Brownback said it best that China is in a war on faith that has to stop. Religious practices, diversity, to be able to enjoy their privacy is actually good for the society. The Chinese government should not treat them as a threat to their existence and survival of the Communist Party.
And of course, it's not just hair that China has been accused of harvesting from Uyghurs. Some people are talking about what's being called halal organ tourism. Have you seen any evidence of that?
Several credible reports being published. At least two UK-based experts have been publicly speaking out about this disturbing news. That I think has some basis. The hospitals in Beijing show that there are designated hospitals actively promoted to Arabic-speaking individuals, patients who are looking for organ donors. The organ harvesting started way back with Falun Gong practitioners. The international community did not pay enough attention. This has continued to become a systematic problem. And now the Uyghur people paying price for it. So I encourage not only the American people, the US government, but also the international community to call China out for these brutal practices. I mean, the human lives appear to have no value when it comes to Chinese government's political interest. This has to stop.
Recently, Congress passed and Trump signed the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act. It basically allows the U.S. to sanction Chinese officials involved in the persecution of Uyghurs. Do you think that's enough, or should the U.S. be doing more? USERF welcomes the recent development and President Trump's signing of this significant historic bill, but that's not enough. Even before this bill is signed, United States government, Congress given tools to the administration to utilize those abusive government officials, entities that facilitated human rights abuses in countries like China. To this day, since the enactment of the Global Magnitsky Act in 2016, there's only one Chinese official that has been sanctioned, which is unacceptable.
I urge President Trump and his team at the Treasury, at the State Department to not only utilize the existing laws, but also effectively implement the Uyghur bill that directs the president to sanction, impose visa restrictions on the Chinese officials who have been responsible for human rights abuses committed against the Uyghurs and Christians and other religious minorities in China. But this should not be the end of the story. This should be just the beginning of this long fight. There are at least two other legislative initiatives in the United States Congress. One is profoundly and significantly important that addresses the forced labor issue. The modern-day slavery is back in the Uyghur societies. At least 83 brands have been linked to the forced labor situation in the Uyghur region. So including the hair product that you asked earlier, or we discussed earlier, the American consumers, American investors have been unwittingly supported this state-sponsored slavery. So this bill, the recently enacted bill, as well as the one that has been considered, addresses the political issues, economic issues, national security issues, and of course moral issues that is dear and near to us, those of us who live in free societies.
Well, so what do you think it will take to actually get the Communist Party to stop persecuting religious groups in China?
Two things have to happen. One is the international community need to be vocal. Chinese government cares significantly how they're being portrayed in international communities around the world. They care so much about their face, so much about their public image. This is why they've been so aggressive to the extent to continue this diplomatic effort dubbed as a wolf diplomacy around the world. So calling them out is one of the effective ways to get their attention. And then two, tackle them on economic fronts. What made the Communist Party as powerful as today is the fact that they have lots of money. So initially, when the international community in the 90s, particularly the United States, brought China into the thinking that making them rich, make the country advance societally, technologically, will make them naturally get onto the right side of the civilized world. That didn't happen. Conversely, they're using that very power, the economic power, diplomatic influence, to create a false division around the world. As we speak, the world is divided thanks to Chinese effort, thanks to Chinese money. Recently, Human Rights Council at the UN took a side with the Chinese authorities. Last summer, there was a split between pro-camp and against camp. There were 22 countries plus Japan came out critical of the Chinese concentration camps. And there were more than 50 countries came out in support of the Chinese concentration camps or Chinese policies. The China's Communist Party's effort to divide the world has been effective, sadly. So the corrupt, corrosive methods that have been implemented, applied by the Chinese authorities, have got them what they want in their wolf diplomacy efforts. So call them out and tackle them on an economic fronts.
Well, don't you think that's going to be hard if the Communist Party has divided the world like you say they have?
Because the world, the international community, falsely believe that criticizing China is somewhat helping or taking the same position as the current administration. That's exactly what and how the Chinese government wants the world to believe. Tackling China, tackling Communist Party, being critical of them, calling them out publicly is a moral issue. The status quo is not sustainable. So it is difficult. We don't advocate cutting off economic ties to the Chinese state as a commission, as a country. But at the same time, the moral issues, moral principles, human rights should not be sacrificed for trade or economic interest. I call on the European governments, particularly those countries that experienced Nazi Germany and fascism, to be vocal or take a position. This is not a difficult position to take. It's not controversial. We've seen it in the history books. We know how this ends when a government purposefully, deliberately, systematically attacking religious minority. The international community need to wake up to this brutal regime if never again means anything to them.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Nuri. It's been a pleasure talking to you again.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. If you'd like to know more about what's happening to the Uyghurs, check out the recent episode of the China Unscripted podcast, where we interview Uyghur activist Aslan Hidayat. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.